sign in?
I already did.
Oh, you did.
Thank you.
And there's a
Just
handout.
waiting for other people. I
Oh,
got 'em.
oh, okay, I see. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of our Training for Teaching program. And the ones that are coming up that you've all gotten information about and so forth, it does help if you tell us that you are coming. Some of you signed up in the very beginning for everyone, and I don't know, but if you can just, when Mary sends a little note out that you can just say you're coming, that helps us mostly to know how much food to have. And do we need to panic about how many people are going to be here? We thought we had to panic tonight, but maybe not. And a couple of things, one thing maybe. I would still love to hear from anyone. We have one open session at the end. I have someone semi-lined up, but if you have any better ideas, I'm totally open to it. I came across something a couple days ago that I wanted to share with you before I turn it over to our speaker from Maria Montessori. And I thought it was something to think about because I think about it a lot. The greatest success, are you going to say, is this? Oh, no.
No.
Is that part of your talk?
Yeah, but
Okay, I won't, no.
No, I think it's a wonderful introduction, so
Okay.
please, yep.
Well, so introducing Theresa Davidson, a good friend, a former client. I'll let her tell you a little bit about her background, but how lucky we are to have someone who's educated in teaching as well as having been a dressage student for many years as an adult amateur rider. So what I came across that I'm now stealing from Theresa, from Maria Montessori, is the greatest sign of success for a teacher is to be able to say, the children are now working as if I did not exist. And is that what we're thinking about as we're teaching?
Can they do it without you?
So I turn it over to Theresa.
Thank you, Lynn. So my profession was, I'm now retired, as a teacher. Specialized in learning disabilities, specifically dyslexic students, at an independent school for dyslexic students in Westchester County, New York. I also, during my time that I was there, I worked as a private tutor and as an admissions officer, which I think you'll see some of that experience in part of my presentation. I also trained but did not teach as to be an assistant in a Montessori classroom, which also informs some of my perspective. I'm a parent, so I've seen children grow, and I am still a student of dressage. So all of these parts of my life have, are you okay with hearing? You can hear everywhere? Okay, so all of these parts of my life have influenced my thinking on the topic of how to teach. The school is considered to be, in the field, the top school in the nation. And it is for a number of reasons, but 4 of which I'm going to touch upon tonight that relate to your work. And they are basically the mission, and you will see this if you choose to follow in the outline. They have a very clearly defined mission. They have a very comprehensive admissions process. Now, they can pick and choose amongst their applicants. That part's not applicable, I think, for our young professionals. They have a very carefully crafted teaching methodology, and they have a formal professional training and mentoring program as well. Those 4 aspects about the school have made it very successful. These children who come to the school are children of average to superior intelligence, and they cannot break the code. That's what dyslexics, that's their primary presenting issue. They understand words, but they cannot make the connection between the squiggles on the page and what they hear, the sounds that the squiggles make. The school provides the students in the time that they're there with the skills, the language skills, the study skills, the advocacy skills, and some of the socialization skills, so that they can return to the mainstream. So the school's purpose is not to keep them forever, but to shore up these weaknesses and send them back out to the world, to the mainstream setting, and so that they can continue there successfully. 97% of the students who go to the school go on to higher education. So the goal of the school, as Lyndon hinted at in her introduction, is the self-sufficiency of the student. It's a lofty goal. Depends on the various students, how far they can get in that goal. But I firmly believe that these methods that the school uses for this very specialized group of learners, if you apply some of them to your own teaching, your students will get further along that path and with a greater understanding of some of the very, very many moving parts to our sport. So my talk will be on these four aspects: the mission, your student, your method, and your own training. Speaking very briefly about the mission, I feel now really Lyndon said it. Your goal, if you set that up, your mission in life and working with your human students, is that they can be self-sufficient without you, or they can get further along that range than they would have otherwise. So before and that's really all I'm going to say on the mission. It's your frame of reference as a teacher, more than anything else. So move on now to the student. Again, you cannot pick and choose your students, but the school goes through tremendous efforts to have a very keen understanding of the nature and the needs, the abilities and the challenges of their students. And I would say that this is something that you should incorporate into your own work with your students. So before I go on and begin to talk about that, I would like to have, I'd like to get a little understanding of when you all started writing. So in answer to my question, at what age did you begin writing, can I have a show of hands of how many people began writing between the ages of 17 and 20? I love it. Okay. 14 to 17, began writing. I love it even more. 10 to 14 years old, good, the hands start coming up, okay. 7 to 10, younger than 7. Okay. Point being, I'm going to give you a theoretical student, new student, okay? She's a 40-something-year-old woman. Did not write as a child. Recently began writing, maybe not even in dressage, as we know. I'm seeing your head shaking affirmatively there. Good. And let's make it even more difficult. She had little or no experiences in sports as a child. I heard a chuckle in there, right? Okay, so this is a handful for you, right? So what I want you, who all started writing very young, to have a keener understanding of is the difference between learning to write as an adult and learning to write as a youngster. So when a youngster, child, especially even the littlest ones, when they begin to learn, their skill is developed through unconscious physical experimentation. Compare that to an adult in our sport trying to learn. It's developed, whatever the skills that she develops are through an intense, conscious, mental effort of gathering and assimilating all of this information. Little kids, when they're learning how to walk, they're not doing that. They're playing with their bodies. Their little children are always in motion, playful with the body. Adults, we're more sedentary, a lot more in general. And when they're playing, they're unconsciously working on their balance. You'll see, I mean, how many times have you seen kids, pop a wheelie on the bicycle? Or if you go skiing, you see them, the snowboarders just jumping all over the place, and the skiers, right? The adult has to consciously develop her sense of balance and coordination, the adult rider. Fear. Kids are, for the most part, fearless as learners. We adults, we're a little afraid of falling and getting hurt. We're more risk averse. They are not. When they move around, they're kind of loosey-goosey, they float, they dance. A beginning dressage rider, like a little bit of a zombie here, right? Emotionally, kids have a clean slate when it comes to the learning process. We adults, we come with a chalkboard full history, opinions, baggage, and from all areas of our lives. Children are humble as learners. Adults are prideful by their circumstances. They're high achieving in other parts of their lives. They run businesses, own businesses, hold leadership positions. If nowhere else than in their families, but in the corporate world, then again, there's more of that prideful by circumstances situation. For children, learning a new skill is not an emotional experience. For adults, it's a very emotional experience. Let me throw out a few emotions: doubt, lack of confidence, fear of failure, embarrassment, insecurity. Okay? Children don't have many responsibilities other than being a student at school to distract or drain them. Your adult, mostly woman, student, she has demands from work, from husbands, from kids, from aging parents, lots, which will distract and or drain her. Kids have few, if any, issues of overall physical well-being. You're all, again, pretty young here. We older people have old injuries, we have arthritis. There's at a certain point change of life and all of the delights that brings with it. Again, that impact and separate the experience of your adult riders from your own personal experiences as a child growing up to become an adult and to ride, and from your experience in teaching children. So this is important to understand these factors and keep this in mind. So let me backpedal one moment. What this second part of this part of my presentation entails is this is your info gathering part now, okay? So you've already said to yourself, okay, children, adults, all right, differences, here we go. As you're gathering information, you obviously want to know how much time has she had in the saddle. Does she ride often on her own? Does she take lessons, her own horse, another horse? If it's a school horse, is it the same one? Is it others? And you'll want to identify what supporting activities now she is doing that may help her to become a better rider, or that you can tap into to draw analogies to the riding experience. So it would be great if she practiced yoga or Tai Chi or martial arts or ballroom dancing. These are just some activities that there's carryover from them. Skiing, weightlifting, singing. Now you're probably thinking, singing? Why singing? Diaphragmatic breathing. Okay. Singers know how to breathe. Breathing is an important component of life, but also of her balance, right? Okay, so that's this point, number one up here. Learning styles and multisensory teaching. I think you all are familiar, at least in concept. There are visual learners, there are auditory learners, and there are tactile and kinesthetic learners, right? Visual learners will benefit by seeing charts, right? The charts help them organize the information. Auditory learners could do without those, and everything that goes in the ear, boom, 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 they're processing it in their brain and getting it through to their bodies. The kinesthetic learners, they learn best by doing. You could talk to them from kingdom come, and until they do it and they feel it, all of the theory won't make any sense to them. They need this whole body movement to process this new and difficult information. So why am I going through all of this? Because you want to make your teaching as multisensory as possible where you can. And I will give you examples of that in the next section. Obviously, in every writing lesson, there's two teachers. There's you, and there's our beloved horses. You're teaching your student using words, verbal directions, and if you demonstrate, right, visual directives. The horse, of course, is teaching through his movement, how he responds to what the writer's asking for, and he also teaches through his words, I call them, the position of his ears, his head, his neck, is the tail swishing. He's talking to us. These are things you know, but are you incorporating them into your teaching of the student? Something to keep in mind. All right, so who is she after having just gone through some of this sort of philosophical thinking? She's a person who has tendencies and traits, personality. Some of these are going to really impact how she learns. So I'm just going to quickly run through some of these and to give you a jump start on thinking about, am I seeing this in this person, in this student, and how can I work with or against that? Emotional stability is a trait and tendency, and all of these exist on a range. So you will want to determine where is she on this range. That will make your job easier or not. Mood or outlook. Does she have a positive outlook about things or not so much of a positive outlook? What's her energy level, high or low? What's the intensity of a response that she makes, whether the response is positive or negative? And the range there is enthusiastic or exaggerated to calm and restrained. Social boldness. Is she bold or is she hesitant? Does she approach something new or does she kind of instinctively withdraw from this? All of these traits have significant implications on your teaching. Is she a person who's normally self-reliant and resilient? Or is she someone who's really dependent? Self-reliant, self-sufficient. Or is she someone who's generally dependent upon others? Tension level, is she generally a relaxed, composed person, or is she tense, impatient, frustrated? Dominance. This trait, human trait, has very significant repercussions for writing. You know, and she might not, the horse needs a leader. He wants a leader. He, like a little kid, does really not want to sort of be in charge of what's going on. Although there are many, of course, who would like to be in charge, but in general, the horse appreciates the leadership. So assess her dominance. Is she someone who is assertive or dominant? And of course, even there's a range. Or is she someone who is accommodating and submissive? Because if you, especially with, in the situation where a horse is kind of taking over, if you've got an accommodating or submissive student, she's going to have a harder time than if you have a student who's a bit more assertive and dominant, because that student will say, is this what I want? No, this is not what I want. Well, I better change it, rather than, he's doing something that I don't want him to be doing. And perfectionism. Can she tolerate disorder and a little bit of messiness in the learning process, or is she like have it right and organized all the time? So these are sort of human tendencies that you will encounter, you already do, and the impact that they have on learning. The next part is cognitive factors. Intelligence for a lead. And what I'm about to talk about are components of intelligence. Her verbal comprehension, I mean, how well is she understanding what you're saying? Is she someone who can pull out the main ideas? Is she someone who can isolate the details of what you're saying? Can she easily make comparisons on her own? Can she identify cause and effect relationships? By your observations of her, you will be able to flesh these out. And any deficits really that she has in these skills, they will be obvious in answers to the questions that you ask her, which of course means you've got to be asking her questions as opposed to telling her things for the most part. Her visual spatial processing, fancy term, basically, can she see a distance? Can she see a line? Can she draw a straight line? I'm looking at this student here, this young woman here in the back, in the black. My eyes can draw a straight line to her. Can I write it? That's a whole other story, all right? But there are students, there are learners who actually kind of can't see a line. They can't see a distance. If any of you have worked with students who jump, you most certainly have seen that. Or how about the person who rides a very squiggly circle, 20-meter circle, which is 22 here and 18 there. Now, complicating the issue is the fact that, can she not see it in the ground? Or does she not have the skills, the physical skills to actually get the horse to ride it? Another factor that you will have to flesh out. And her processing speed. You're wondering what's that? Okay, it's the rate at which we take in information, process it in our brain, and because we're riding, make that go through the body. And here are signs of a student, of a learner who has a slow auditory processing speed, because obviously you're talking to them, okay? So, she'll get overwhelmed when there's too much information coming to her at once. She doesn't remember details of things that you said. So of course, if you've asked, okay, well, give me a recap on what I said, and you get 2 out of 7 or something, there's a sign there. She needs more time to answer questions. She needs to hear the information more often than others will. And of course, let me step to the side here. Obviously, you're going to have men students too, but since most of the students are women, that's why I'm going with the female gender here. She'll miss nuances in descriptions, and she'll have trouble following multi-step directions. The takeaway from this here, she's going to look like a deer in the headlights. You've heard that expression before. She'll freeze up, she'll shut down, she'll be blocked. I'm sure you've all seen students like that. There's a good possibility that she's dealing with some of these deficits. And so your greater awareness of them will be to her benefit. In addition to all of those potential challenges, she also could have learning challenges, attention deficit, the inability to stay keenly focused on one phenomenon to the exclusion of others. And her attention can waver, obviously, from short to long, from sustained to wavering, or more or less distractible. A colleague of mine had this expression that has always stuck with me. She said, our students at the school, she said, they have Teflon brains. Does anybody not know what Teflon is or have not heard of the expression? It's what makes, when you go to fry an egg in a pan, the stuff that's on it so that it doesn't stick. Okay, our kids had Teflon brains. So if you have a student who has a Teflon brain, it's very likely that she will forget on day 2 what you were doing on day 1. And it's not an intelligence factor, it's the fact that the brain doesn't hold, she can't maintain the focus on the attention on that and hold it over, carry it over to the next day. This is obviously a candidate for a lot of review in work, right? Dyslexics, I'm sure you know, left hand, right hand, confusion, quick, easy fix, say inside, outside, boom, done. Then there are other ways in which the brain functions that will affect her learning. She might have deficits in her working memory, which is, an example of that is, my phone number is 203-123-4567. Can you call me, please, on that number now? It's holding new information in while using it at the same time. There are people who don't do that as effectively. Then there's what they call cognitive flexibility, the ability to think about a problem in more than one way. And self-monitoring, which is the ability to monitor your performance and say, okay, measured up to this standard, I'm not where I need to be. And then actually, out of all of these, I think the one that is the most impactful is somebody who, non-technical term, overly sensitive. You can have someone who will startle easily when there's an abrupt noise, or an abrupt movement, or the lawnmower's going at the property next door and you can just see them getting really tight because it's just completely grating on their nerves. A strong wind, the sound of the wind. They can't take that and put it out there and leave it behind and ignore it. It's going into their body and we cannot separate it. So that's a distinct challenge for these students. So your writer can bring to the learning experience a wide variety of combinations of these different attributes. You need to identify those quickly because it will be obviously to her benefit. And for every writer to learn something, there's an unknown number of repetitions that she's got to do in order to even minimally attain some proficiency at it, okay? Your job is to try to figure that out. And then all of these tendencies and traits that I've just described, that's going to make that number, that magic unknown number of repetitions, higher or lower depending upon how many or few of them that she has. So your default method of teaching is going to have to shift for her and other students presenting like her And I leave you with this one particular thought. There was a fellow who was a ventriloquist who said, if they can't learn the way we are teaching them, we have to teach them the way they learn. This was a fellow in South Texas who drove a school bus, and then and also he was an aide in one of the special ed classrooms, and that was where he brought his ventriloquist puppets in with him. And in the learning disabilities community, I mean, it's like this quarters up on every school, or certainly within the minds and hearts of the teachers. And now the last piece, and not an insignificant one, is physical factors about your student that are going to affect learning, like it or not. Laterality. Is she lefty or righty? I think there's a bit more of a challenge for righties to be teaching lefties. Or she might have a mixed dominance, and that kind of student, you're actually going to see her make mistakes that a pure righty or a pure lefty would not be making. Proprioception, fancy word. It's a sense that we have that allows us to perceive the location, the movement, and the action of different body parts. Does she know where she is in space? And it combines with other senses for her to be able to locate these, her body in space. So is she aware that she's got locked elbows? Is she aware that her thighs are a little loose on the saddle? Is she aware that she has a vice-like grip on the reins? Those are examples. The anatomy and the conformation of the rider, obviously, the difference between the male pelvis and the female pelvis, the male sacrum and the female sacrum, and the proportions of body segments. This is an important one because it's something that's easy to overlook. What is the length of her torso relative to the length of her legs? Obviously, the longer the torso, the more muscle that needs to be firmed up, and the harder work that she has to do in order to maintain that. What's the relationship between upper arm and lower arms? The longer that the arm is, just in general, independent of proportion, the heavier her hands are going to be. So these are all things you should be on the lookout for to point out to her. So these tendencies and traits and these cognitive factors and these learning challenges and these physical factors are all going to affect her learning. So the more that you know about them and the more keenly that you can assess them, the better you can fine-tune your learning. Again, because you can't pick and choose the ideal body, mind, and spirit to be teaching. And obviously, if she's coming with her own horse, then that gets combined with the temperament, the conformation, and the skill level, and the soundness, and the suitability of the horse that she's coming to you with. So it just keeps compounding all of these challenges and the work that you all have to do. So now I'm getting to the meat of the whole thing, the how, right? This is part 3 here, your method and your how. You'll see here, I've got 10 different individual methods that I will be describing, and the one that's in the bold print, to execute the lesson, that's got the 12 techniques. That's the core of the core, okay? But I really feel that I needed to give you some of this background so that the examples that I'm using and what I'm going to be explaining will have a little more sense. I'm in about halfway? Yep, okay, good. All right. Maria Montessori again says, one test of the correctness of an educational procedure is the happiness of the child. I'm sure you've had times when you've had a student say, walk out of the arena beaming because something clicked that day, right? And I'm sure, of course, you have the opposite scenario. But of course, your aim is to get them to that moment on that day and multiple days in succession, of course. I think many people have heard of the Feldenkrais technique. He has said, Moshe Feldenkrais said, when a student knows what she's doing, she can do what she wants. Just some little, I peppered in here some quotes to just give a little inspiration, I think. All right, your method. Well, the first thing that you do is you learn about the nature and needs of your students, which is what I just covered, okay? And these, again, all of these parts of the how, this is what was done, what is done to this very day in the school where I had the good fortune to work. But this kind of a method is applicable and transferable to what you're doing. Construct a comprehensive lesson plan. Okay, well, again, that has, and it's based on the nature and needs of your student, long-term goals, intermediate objectives, obviously based on the principles of the training scale and respecting the requirements of whatever USD level she's working on. And we're assuming here, this student that we're talking about, this theoretical student, is operating somewhere between training first level, second level. This third one, you're probably going to look at it and say, I can't do that. Allocate time daily, ideally, at first, for lesson prep between students. Hopefully, your schedule could allow that. Hopefully, you can say, okay, you could block off a 1 hour time period. Your lessons are 45 minutes. That gives you time afterwards to do what? Quick little notes about what went well, even if it's 1 or 2 key words. I remember Lendon telling students, get a notebook, write these things down afterwards. I want you to know I have a lot of notebooks. Thank you. I started writing dressage with London, not before I got to her. I did other writing before I got to her. It's helpful, and it will be a part of your review with the student the next day. So if you can allocate, I'm saying 15 minutes just because a clock, an hour is the 60, and many lessons are not a full hour. As you get a little better at this, or as you get to know the student a little better, maybe you can reduce it to 1 time period in the morning and 1 time period in the afternoon if you're working with a lot of students. The fourth thing that good teachers do is, and here is the meat of the meat of the meat here, they're executing the lesson in a systematic manner. 12 techniques I'm going to give you. The first is verify. Make no assumptions about her understanding of what a particular term means, how to give an aid, how to ride a gate. Even with one as simple as the walk, simple from a physiological standpoint for the student. If you are asking a student to send the horse forward, some will go bump, bump, bump with their legs. Others will go like this with their body, trying to send the student forward. You know that a horse walks hind, front, hind, front. Essentially, they're like bipeds, right? One side goes, then the other side goes. Does she know that she needs to send 1 seatbelt forward at a time? This is an example of you're not assuming that she understands how to ride the walk. Another good example of not assuming is with a serpentine, or even just those shallow loops that they start off with earlier in like first level, I think it is. A loop, by definition, has 3 parts, right? Each part has its own requirements. Do not assume that she knows that as she's ending one turn and beginning another, no matter how shallow it may be, she's got to be doing something different, okay? All right, verify. Review. Always, always, always review in your work with your students. A quick and easy way to do it, and it's so simple. Student walks into the arena. Hi, how are you? What's your takeaway from the last time we worked together or you rode? What's your takeaway? Now, hopefully she's going home and writing notes or dictating them into her phone, into one of those two, and she, just by asking her that question and her having to answer it, is kind of setting her up for the work to do. You can also review some basic concepts, ones which especially the ones which because you who started writing as students, this just all came into your body. You have to force yourself into awareness to teach some of these aspects to your students. What's the most influential aid that you can give to a horse? Somebody. Your weight, right? Your weight is I think it is the single most influential. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Assuming that we're in agreement, what about your eyes? Your eyes affect your weight. You want to bring her attention to the relationship between the head that's looking down, what the impact it has on the weight, on the single most influential aid to the horse. How about reminding her of the concept that her posture affects the horse's posture? Her energy level affects the horse's energy level. Her breathing can affect the horse and his movement. Make sure or remind her of the fact that, hey, there's 4 quadrants to our body. You have the left, the right, the upper, and the lower. Each of those is a different job. Make sure she knows it. Make sure you review it relative to the work that you were doing before. And it's so obviously, but it seems to go unsaid a lot. Newton's 3rd law of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. To me, a great example of that is if you're sitting in a chair with a hard seat to it, and I say to you, push down on your right foot really hard, and you do it, what's going to happen to that right seat bone? Which is the other end. It's going to lift up a little bit. So she needs to understand that if she's crooked one way, she's losing that whole other side, for example. So these are examples of some of the basic concepts that you can review with her. Let's say she comes in, you're going to do something new. I don't know, maybe leg yield from the center line. Yep, go down center line, leg yielding. You want to make sure she has the prerequisite skills, first and foremost. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. want to then, as part of your introduction, deconstruct the task into its component parts. In this case, you do have to give direct instruction to the student. You have to specifically tell her what it is that needs to be done. I'm sure you've all heard of the KISS principle. Yeah, someone said keep it simple, stupid. No, how about keep it simple and short instead? Give directions in terms of the action you want her to take versus the result that you might be looking for. And here's an example, and this is an example. On a serpentine, again, let's do a serpentine that is deeper, 3-loop serpentine. You know that she's basically riding from outside rein to outside rein, executing these changes of direction. But if you say to someone, especially someone who's literal, you say, outside rein, half halt. I believe that her brain is going to translate that into rein. All she's going to hear is rein and start using the rein. Whereas on the other hand, if you say you want to move the outside shoulder in order to be able to change the direction, then move is what she's going to hear. And you will have a better chance of her actually executing that more smoothly and more correctly. Use precise wording, which follows from what I just said previously. If you want her, again, because the seat is the most influential aid, if you want her to put more weight in her seat bone, let's assume here a rider who, coming through the corner of the posting trot, falls to the inside. She's falling to the inside in part because her right seat bone's coming off, and maybe she's not even stepping down fully into the right stirrup. You tell her to step down into the right stirrup. If she's sitting even, tell her to sit down to the right stirrup. What's going to happen is she's going to be put, I just lost my place here, hold on. What you really want her to do is to put more weight into the right seat bone, because the seat bone is what's talking to the horse as opposed to her foot in the stirrup. If you say to her, another example of precise wording, inside leg to outside rein, right? Well, okay, inside leg. I have an upper portion to my inside leg and I have a lower portion to my inside leg. Which part of my inside leg do you want me to use? The top, the bottom, or the whole thing? Be precise. Use imagery. Imagery is so helpful. You want the rider upright. Have her imagine being a capital letter T. Okay, minus the arms, right? And if she is falling in on a turn, is your body a capital T or is it a capital C as you're going through that corner? And what's nice about this, what's helpful, is you're asking a question in a non-judgmental way instead of saying, you're falling on the turn, right? It's easy to kind of fall into that response. Your tone is as important as the text, as what you're saying. I think one of my favorite images, because I for a long time had trouble with the Canada part in one direction. For some reason I got it in the other. Everybody's seen a cat on the floor, wants to hop up. What does it do? It squats to jump up to reach the table. Isn't that what a horse's outside hind leg does? Have her imagine a cat jumping up as she's thinking about executing the Canada part, because that will help her think about sitting in with that outside seat bone, as well as taking the outside leg back and using the inside leg as well, depending on the horse. Great image for the seat. Again, using the seat to drive the horse instead of the legs flapping around. Have her imagine jumping on a trampoline. Her feet are the equivalent of the seat, and the trampoline is the horse's back. Anybody knows that when people jump on a trampoline, you can jump a little bit, you can go high, or you can go lower. Another great image is a hand dribbling a basketball. Right? We've all seen basketball players do that. They can dribble or do that. Have her draw the analogy between those everyday images and what she's trying to achieve on the horse. And of course, what you're doing is you're relating the unknown to the known, or rather, the known to the unknown, sorry. Maria Montessori again says, to teach details is to bring confusion. To establish the relationship between things is to bring knowledge. She'll get it sooner by having that connection. Engage as many senses as possible. Make your teaching and her learning multi-sensory. Famous quote, I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. Another technique is to induce her to problem solve. How do you do that? You ask questions. The way that we would interpret whether or not students understood what they read was we would ask the WH questions. Who, what, when, where, why, how, which is just an H, of course. Do the comparable thing in your work with the students. Oh, what do you think you did that allowed this to happen? Or what could you have done to prevent that from happening? Or where in his body did you feel that? Or where in the movement did something go wrong? Those kinds of questions. If you ask her, and she's got to start thinking about it. Another technique is to have the student teach herself out loud to you. Oh, I'm coming around that turn, and oh, okay, wow, I feel those haunches are going out. Well, I need to shore up all my outside aches, as an example. The student talking out loud, she's feeling it, she's saying it, she's hearing it. Again, multi-sensory. And then finally, you want to provide feedback using unambiguous terms. That was a correctly written circle. That was a square halt. I see that your driving seat phones are asking the horse to walk like a biped, not jump like a bunny. Those kinds of things to say that are feedback, and they're helpful, and they're describing what is. All right, so and those are the 12 techniques that are part of executing the lesson. These I'll go through a little more quickly. So now, number 5 is employing supporting materials. Okay, the obvious ones, yes, arena markers, mirrors, you've got that. When you're teaching a student about maybe a 3-loop serpentine or a shallow loop, use cones if you can. Again, especially if someone's struggling, obviously. How about your mounting block? It's good for just climbing up to get up on the horse. Have her sit down on it. Mounting block is hard. You can feel your seat bones really well on that. Have her move around and get a sense for what it feels like to feel the seat bone. She might not have that. Have her sit on a physio ball, which is the opposite. It's all mushy-gushy, and let her move around and play with movement. These are the kinds of things that kids would be doing as just part of being kids, but yet information is going through. You want to get information going through as many channels, as much as you can, as often as you can. I know Lendon at one time brought to the barn one of those mini trampolines, and then we had the resistance bands, and it was attached to something, and we'd have to jump up on the trampoline, and you would see if your arms were doing this or if you were able to absorb the movement. A lot of good good feedback there. Just see some other. Have her, God, if you can, have her sit on the back of a horse bareback and walk it around. Let her feel that. Again, it's giving her a greater sense of just a different sensation. Maybe have her sit in a different saddle, even if just at the walk, how the different saddles feel for her to be able to find her seat bones. Use ground poles, cavalettis, jumps, and then of course the best, use Mother Nature, get her out of the sandbox and have her go walk. I mean, where London had her facility, there was asphalt, there was grass, there was flat surface, there were hills. All of those different surfaces are sending different messages into her head and into her body, actually. The next ones I think are kind of fun. Provide reinforcement activities. Well, they'll be fun for her. You can demonstrate something and talk. I remember Linda doing that. Have her watch other students' lessons and listen. Again, more information coming in. Encourage her to audit a clinic. Spectator shows, standing next to you while you're coaching somebody, but not saying anything. Maybe start a book club at the barn, or hold a potluck video night. And you can assign some of these things to, if you have an assistant, you can assign them to her to conduct. Independent practice, this is key. Homework, okay? Didn't we all have to do homework pretty much almost every night when we went to school? Most of us, right? Well, guess what? I mean, it would be helpful for them to have some homework. Here's a great example. Tell them, one day this week you're gonna go and work on your own. And then come back to me and tell me what it was like, what happened. And you give them parameters for the report that you want them to give back to you. What was difficult? What did they do to overcome the difficulty? What was the result? Could they think of something else they can try next time to approach that problem? The notes, have them write notes. What I would do sometimes with one coach that I had is I would have my notes and I would send them, not always, and occasionally I would get feedback from them, and it was very helpful. And it's helpful to you because you actually now know from her what she has incorporated, what she's understood, how she's processed that information. Send them a photo. Doesn't have to be of them. And say, what do you think about this one? What do you see? Brain's going. It's working. Ask them to write down, handwritten, not on their computer or something, and then email it to you. The aids for particular exercise, especially the one they're having the most difficulty in. Multisensory. They're writing it. They're seeing it. Maybe they're even saying it out loud while they're doing it. They're just getting the information in more ways. Good teachers evaluate the lesson, and they revise the lesson plan with the strategies for the student. Good teachers solicit and incorporate feedback. Now, in the school, we're not asking the students, do you think I did a good job learning? But we do have parent-teacher conferences, so the sort of equivalent here, I mean, now you're working with an adult, you can say, how was that for you? He was a mayor in New York City. He was the mayor for 3 consecutive terms, which is very rare in New York City. His name was Ed Koch. Some people of this vintage might know him. He used to go around, he would ride the subways, which no other mayor did, and he'd get off at a subway stop and he'd greet people who were coming out and he'd say, "How am I doing? How am I doing?" He must have been doing something right because he was in office for 3 consecutive terms, and he was the most beloved mayor, not the, of the city. So you want to understand from the student what they think you could do to help them to learn better. It's a humbling experience, but it's important nonetheless. And then finally, the 10th thing that good teachers do is they share their resources. Again, Lyndon used to post up all of these images on the walls going through, from the barn through the indoor. You would see, you would see maybe an image of the training scale, the pyramid of training. There's all sorts of images that you can be posting, or photos of a correct position, photos of beautifully written. I'm seeing one of the most elegant things is the half pass, the image of those legs. I mean, it's something that the student will hold into, or images from books about biomechanics. And actually speaking about that, on the back of this outline, these are my favorite books as an adult student struggling at the lower levels of the sport. They're all in my library, and actually when I moved, I now live here half the year. Too many to be carrying back and forth, I bought a second copy. I have one set up there, and I have a set down here. Because when there's something that I don't get, I want to be able to go to it no matter where I am, and get some support from those books. So they're my personal favorite. Let's see what else. And maybe, I mean, if you actually have an extensive library, you might consider setting up a lending library, but you have to know your students for that. I mean, you don't want to be losing something. Or if there's clinics and workshops that you know, let them know about it. So those are some examples of sharing your resources. And the final part to this, good teachers continue their training. Cannot be overstated. Never stop acquiring knowledge. Confucius said, acquire new knowledge while thinking over the old, and you, my friend, may become a teacher of others, a teacher in that true sense of the word there. Here's some examples. Please read the USDF Teaching Manual. Review it regularly. There's so much great information in there. Same thing with the training manual. Those are, I don't know if I listed it, but those are in my library as well. Study learning theory, both equine and human, and biomechanics, both equine and human. I touched on some of the human learning theory. I didn't even go anywhere near the equine learning theory. I'm totally out of my league. But you should know it. And conduct your own self-evaluation, your own periodic self-evaluation. USDF Teaching Manual in the appendix. Are you a good teacher? It's like 2 pages, a lot of questions. Evaluate yourself, because in doing that, that's how you improve. Solicit a mentor. Be a mentor. Depending on where you all are in age and experience, be one of them. Do or be one of those at least. And please, I know it's expensive, it's time consuming, it takes you away from your business, but I think you should enroll in instructor certification program. This is your only method of, your only chance to get official and well thought out training to be a teacher. Okay? I think it's hugely, hugely important. But USDF University has a lot of good information. There's conferences, USDF conference, the AAEP conference, as well as the USDF Trainers Conference that was here, not just the general one. Network with other professionals, sharing resources, follow the latest research. I mean, the internet has got so many things. We don't have enough time to be looking at everything, but make the attempt. So that's, in conclusion, which is always a good way to end up, we've looked at, in part one, our theoretical student. In part two, we've considered the emotional, the behavioral, the cognitive, and the physical factors that influence her learning. We've explored in this third part the methods and the techniques that good teachers of learning disabled students employ that you can carry over into your work for possible use. And hopefully we've inspired you in contemplating your own continuing education. So that's it. Thank you so much.